Today, we will be discussing how to build high-performing multi-channel ABM programs. I know we have many Triblio customers attending today, but for those of you I haven't met, my name is Andrew Mahr, and I'm the Chief Customer Officer here at Triblio. I've spent the last 10 years leading high-performance teams in marketing and have overseen the launch of more than 1,000 ABM campaigns with Triblio customers now. The webinar content today is all from working with them, our customers, and learning from their great ideas. So to get started, I want to ask this question: what sets high-performing ABM programs apart? You've probably read stats about how well ABM is doing across the industry, that it has higher ROI than other B2B marketing strategies, but what is it that actually sets apart those top-performing programs from those that are just average? To get to that, we really need to start by first taking a look at what a real B2B buyer's journey looks like today. Now, in a perfect and simple world, the journey looks something like this, where a buyer begins to do some research, then maybe goes to an event to learn more about your product or the category they're exploring, and eventually is ready to talk to sales. And all along the way, you've been able to nurture them with progressively lower funnel content and marketing materials. A real B2B buyer's journey, though, tends to look something much more like this, where you have a large buying group, not a single lead, handling the whole decision by themselves, and they're taking often circuitous, not linear routes, where they might need lower funnel conversation or content at one point, but then maybe looking at things that you consider mid or top of funnel later, sending confusing signals about what stage they're actually in. The point is, you can't predict exactly how they're going to interact, what content they're going to consume at any given moment, and certainly not the channels they're going to interact with you. You need to be consistent in delivering the right message to them and building consensus across this group as they evaluate you and move further and further to the point where they're ready to make a purchase. Let me show you what this looks like in a real-world example. This is an example from a customer of ours, Plex, who sells ERP software into manufacturing companies. And they wanted to get started out with an ABM pilot and see if they could build engagement with their best fit accounts, their target accounts, by serving up some account-based advertising and trying to build engagement with a new set of stakeholders. Now, in the 3 weeks before ABM and the 3 weeks during ABM, by running those ads, they didn't actually see much of a change in engagement, as you can see in the numbers on the screen. But what's really interesting is when they looked further into the data, they actually did see a huge lift in engagement from some of these ABM efforts, but it just didn't follow the linear course they were expecting, where someone might click on an ad and then engage with the landing page directly. Instead, you saw a lift of 65 to 213 individuals who are now going from those target accounts directly to the Plex.com homepage. You have almost a 5 times lift in the number of people who are searching organically for this company, branded, or just the category, and then clicking on those search results and showing up on the Plex website. And you even see a huge lift there in the paid search results, so people being more familiar with who they are when they're doing these searches about ERP, and then clicking through on the paid Plex placements. So the ABM is very effective here in driving more engagement, but it's not happening in that linear sense where you'd expect from typical B2B marketing, where you serve an ad and the next step is a landing page. Instead, the challenge that Plex saw here is that they had success, but it didn't come in the form they expected, and they needed to be able to engage these people on all these different channels and the different response pathways that the buyers wanted to take in exploring their solutions. So this is the key takeaway, and what we want to drive into with some of the other content we talk about is that high-performing ABM campaigns nurture buying groups with consistent messaging across all channels, because you can't predict how and when these target accounts are going to want to engage with you. Now, at Triblio, we've seen this need evolve over the last several years in serving our ABM customers, and so we've built out technology that tries to solve that cross-channel problem, where we're allowing customers to serve advertising to their target accounts across display networks, then engage them with personalized content on the website, and then even follow up with the right sales triggers and follow-up responses at the right time, depending on the engagement that account is showing. And all that's built on a platform that ingests and identifies purchase signals, so we know when and how to engage with these accounts, and then can measure by KPIs the revenue impact and the overall program performance. So as an example of this, we'll look at a customer story of ours with a company called Veristore. Veristore had a really great campaign using third-party intent to drive marketing and sales execution with consistency across channels and ultimately get really great campaign results. And specifically what Veristore did was utilize intent data to segment their accounts, understanding which accounts to reach out to and when to do so with what content, and then execute tiered ABM programs that reached out to those accounts with digital advertising, website personalization, and direct mail, eventually culminating in sales conversations to drive a really outstanding campaign. I really like this example of a cross-channel ABM campaign because it involves a lot of the normal elements that our customers and people I talk to in the market are wanting to integrate and coordinate in their ABM programs, starting out with that intent data that signals when an account should be in a campaign and how you might segment for them, and then coordinating these channels of display advertising and retargeting, making the website personalization experience relevant to the buyers, and then having those offline touches too, like direct mail and teleservices outreach, along with some of the traditional things like email, all in support of that event goal. And for those of you who are looking to place this and see what kind of fit would it be for your program, this is one where the strategy was net new and cross-sell acquisitions. They'd already identified those accounts going after that tier 1 and tier 2 type list. The program goal was highly qualified new logo and cross-sell prospects being driven to an event for AE follow-up. This was integrated with an event specifically. And then last, the deployment model was named account marketing, so a one-to-many model. And this campaign didn't just consider multiple channels, but also multiple funnel stages, where they started out with that target demand, knowing their tier 1 and tier 2 account list, and then thought about active demand, who's actually in a buying process right now, using that intent and purchase signal data to identify those accounts, and then work them through these stages of engaged demand, accounts that are actually showing some level of campaign response, all the way through to prioritized and qualified demand, where there's now sales follow-ups happening and a higher level of marketing investment at these events and through the direct mail programs. So first, let me talk in detail about that initial detection process, how accounts were qualified into this campaign. And it began with a combination of two signals. So the accounts were all from that tier 1 and tier 2 list, but then entered this either by showing a high level of third-party intent data from Bombora or having a very high level of anonymous engagement with Veristore on their website, and that rolled up to them through Triblio's account scoring. Those two signals then combined into a single picture of the account and their overall engagement. And if an account was showing enough interest, they would be entered into this program where Veristore would get contacts from Discover.org and then put them into the program to be nurtured by marketing. And when you see what Veristore did with their marketing collateral in this campaign, you begin to get a really clear picture of what it looks like to deliver a consistent message, a consistent buying experience across multiple channels to make sure, again, that buying group is being allowed to explore your resources and solutions in a consistent way, regardless of what channel they happen to prefer at a given moment. So it began with these advertisements when a account entered the campaign, getting sent out to the key decision makers so they begin to see that Veristore wanted to meet them at this event, and that's where the messaging was first introduced. Once those were running for a week or so, a direct mail piece went out, again, to those key decision makers with collateral that matched, messaging that matched, again, staying on point with the campaign so that now the prospects are hearing about it on multiple channels. At the same time, also, sales began to reach out, and whether it was over email or social or phone, they were, again, using the same message with that introduction. But in all these cases, we know how buyers are. They might choose to ignore the rep, ignore the emails they're getting, and just say, okay, well, you know, Veristore looks interesting, but before I have a conversation with them, I want to go do my own research. And if people did that and just went straight to the home page or just went straight to the blog, again, Veristore was able to deliver the same CTA, a consistent message, consistent positioning of who they were, so that regardless of which channel the buyer or buyers decided to interact with them on, they would be getting invited to the right next step, and all the pieces of that campaign could ultimately support each other. And based on the campaign responses that they got from these target accounts, Veristore deployed a number of follow-up actions, which again were highly coordinated so that the buying group had a consistent experience throughout this campaign. An ADR and an AE were following up ahead of the event to get that meeting set up, as well as afterward if the event was missed. There was, of course, the on-site experience at the event where they were delivering on this next step and then setting up further meetings. But there was also, through their marketing program, email thank yous that went out, as well as further account assignments so that if the account showed a certain level of interest but then weren't able to book a meeting on site, there were appropriate follow-up actions taken afterward. And again, these things are all happening in lockstep with each other. So when an account is hearing about this event offer ahead of time, experiencing things on site and during the event, and even getting follow-up afterward, it's a consistent buying experience that they're being offered where they know exactly who Veristore is and what the value proposition for them is to spend more time and take these follow-up conversations with Veristore. So it's a great example of a high-performing program and how they use multiple channels together to deliver that consistent experience and make it clear to the buyer how to engage with them more. But something else really interesting about how Veristore executed that campaign is the way they used intent data as a foundation for triggering some of these actions. And it always raises a lot of questions when I'm talking with customers or prospects about how else marketers can combine ABM and intent data to get great results. And it's a fantastic question because these two strategies and technology are highly complementary, and we do see some really specific strategies succeeding across more customers who are doing things like Veristore to innovate in the way that that data can feed into their ABM program. So by far the most common example or pattern we see is B2B marketing organizations orchestrating the buying experience for their target accounts using the third-party intent signals as a guide for who they should be reaching out to and with what. So it works at the top of the funnel where the intent data will be an initial trigger, signaling that an account should be included in the campaign, even if they weren't planned to earlier. And that triggering sequentially display advertising or other tactics to begin nurturing and creating brand awareness with that account. Then website personalization to make sure that as the buying group proceeds in the process and begin doing their own research, they get a consistent and the correct offer as they engage with your company. And then finally, sales activation. We know that B2B buyers today are putting off form fills, putting off registrations longer and longer. They want to be in control of their own journey and be in control of the information they're giving up. And so we can respond to this by having informed sales teams knowing who's showing those early signals and how to follow up in a meaningful, value-additive way where they can create a good conversation even if that company hasn't registered in a form yet. A great example of this and a really innovative approach to using intent data to drive these programs is from a customer of ours, Redpoint Global, who sells a CDP solution but has two very different personas that they might target in an organization. First of all, they have a potential technical buyer, somebody from IT who is looking for a very technical solution for a business problem, but they also have a different persona who could be marketing or customer success who needs a CDP solution, but is coming at it from a very different angle, has different pain points, and is going to be using different language while they research and evaluate solutions. And the way they solve for that problem of who they should reach out to and what messaging that account should be receiving is by using intent data to triangulate to who the persona is that's leading the buying process at that account. So this is a very simplified view of the program. But you can imagine kind of one set of intent signals that would indicate interest in a customer data platform, topics and keywords that show much more of a technical buyer, and another set of keywords that indicate that the account is showing a lot of interest in the customer experience platform, which goes more to that marketing or customer success use case. So depending on which group of intent signals Redpoint is seeing, they'll have a very different campaign launched where the ads will emphasize different points of the value proposition and content appropriate to who they think those personas are. And they'll even target those ads to different individuals and different roles in those companies. Then if those companies happen to respond and show interest and do come to the website, even through anonymous visits, the experience they see there is going to be very different depending, again, on what those intent signals are. If it's an IT-led process, they're going to see much more IT-friendly content, and vice versa for the marketing or customer success use case. And then, of course, sales is being informed how to follow up as well. So if you see a lot of interest for customer data platform, you don't want to nurture that buyer with the right content only to have sales then follow up with generic messaging or messaging that's really more appropriate to a marketing buyer. So they make sure the sales follow-up is aligned with all of that nurture that's been happening that's specific to the persona. So the contacts they get and then the scripts the sales team runs as they're reaching out on phone and over email and social are all aligned to what marketing's been doing to create the engagement in the first place in these accounts. Now that use case raises a really interesting question too, and it's one that's critical for high-performing ABM programs to address, which is how do marketers, these marketing organizations that are adopting ABM, actually activate sales to generate pipeline growth? We know that ABM is founded on the idea that marketing and sales are pursuing accounts together and highly coordinated. But in reality, it's difficult to launch those processes, and a lot of ABM initiatives will start in marketing, but then have trouble getting things over into a regular, scalable, and predictable sales follow-up. So those high performers, how are they solving for that challenge? And again, using intent data, whether that's third-party or first-party, can be great for keeping sales aligned with the types of engagement that your marketing campaigns are generating with your prospects. So whether those responses are anonymous to the website or taking place on even third-party sites, you can be passing that data to the salespeople, allowing them to understand which accounts to be reaching out to and how they might want to personalize their messaging. And I'll share a few specific examples of how customers of ours have done that with their sales teams. So the first example I'll share of this is the competitive box out. So imagine that your ABM program has done some of these things that we've talked about earlier in the webinar really well. You've identified the right accounts, you've nurtured them, there's engagement built, you've even gotten a meeting set for sales. But now, as the sales conversations begin to happen, you detect with intent data that that company is actually beginning to engage with some of your competitors at the same time, going through all their due diligence and research and trying to understand what's available to them. Well, that's great timing for you to pass the information on to sales and equip them to run a specific play. So if you know that that company is beginning to research and show interest in competitor X, you can then send, as a marketing team, over to that sales rep a specific play to run with competitive talking points, objections they can plant, and pain points to highlight where you have a competitive advantage and are going to be able to serve that customer better. And although we're talking about sales activation as a use case here, marketing's job doesn't stop just at the point where they share this intelligence and maybe the scripts with sales. They can continue to do their own nurturing as well. So if you know that there's a certain competitor who's in the deal, web personalization can change. We've seen a lot of customers do this very effectively, where the messaging changes in that stage of the opportunity to address what you know are the competitive talking points and the specific solution and value proposition that the account needs to see and have consensus around in order to choose your solution. And of course, you don't want to count on that company coming to your website and asking these questions. You can actually be pushing that message out through ads that, again, are personalized to the specific pain points and competitive situation, so that whatever the rep is saying about those competitive talking points is the same thing that those prospects are hearing when they're on other parts of the internet doing research and see your advertising follow them around. A consistent message and hopefully a very proactive and effective competitive box out. Now, another really important method for activating sales with intent is to equip your sales teams to focus on the right interests and concerns of a specific account. So say you're a company that has 5 or more different solutions, and your sales reps are always needing to understand which of those offer the biggest opportunity in an account that they're working with. Well, it's not enough for you as a marketer simply to tell your reps that a specific account all of a sudden is interested and needs follow-up. You actually need to be telling them which solution, because if that account is showing a lot of engagement, but it's for product A, and your rep, rolls the dice and ends up following up with messaging about product C, they're not going to get a response. They're not going to get traction with that customer or prospect because they've reached out about the wrong thing. So sales and marketing running together off of intent data allows you to stay on the same page. So marketing can be generating the right type of engagement, but then sales can be reaching out about the right type of pain points, the right type of features and benefits that your platform offers, and even like you saw with Redpoint, knowing which individuals to reach out to an account based on changes that they're seeing in that behavior over time. And just like in our last example, the process for marketing doesn't stop just with passing that information over, but you can actually feed the right type of sales discovery questions to your team so that they begin having those conversations. If they're able to make contact, they know what pain points and what solution areas to be drilling into and what the follow-up responses are, so they know how to plan, the next conversation and the one after that based on how companies and prospects are responding to the initial meetings they have. You can also find out if there are more people getting involved. Are you seeing a surge of anonymous visitors to your website from that account? That tells you the buying group is forming. You can even look at the pages that company is exploring as a whole to identify which of your solutions they're actually showing the most interest in. And again, do that synchronized follow-up where based on all these signals together, you don't just have the sales rep focusing on the right concern, but you begin to tailor the marketing experience that buying group is having through ads and website personalization that show a coordinated message, as well as other channels as well that you're orchestrating. The final method for activating sales with intent that I want to talk about is really at the heart of a lot of ABM program efforts we work on with customers, because it has to do with how you're equipping sales development or inside sales teams to prioritize their prospecting and go after these accounts in conjunction with marketing. So in the life of an SDR or a BDR, you're going to have reps reaching out to 10 or dozens, even 100 accounts in a week, depending on the program. And as you know, hearing very often very little back in response, maybe 2%, 3% actual response rates to email. Very few people picking up the phone and having a conversation initially. So this can be a very difficult world for the reps to inhabit, where they're putting a lot of feelers out there and not getting a lot of signal back on where to spend their time and how to prioritize. Ghost replies are a form of anonymous response to these sales touches that make reps much more aware of where to spend their time and how to personalize. So what we found when we looked at data with our customers is that, what reps are experiencing is true. They'll reach out and send, 50 emails and only get one response back. But behind the scenes, there are a number of people who will see the email and actually have a positive response to it, be engaged, but instead of writing to that rep or instead of clicking on the link because they don't want to be tracked, they'll instead just Google for that solution or Google and go straight to the company's homepage. And if you can pass that data back on to the reps, they then can see that even though they didn't see any clicks on their email and even though they didn't get a response to the voicemail they left, they can see that these certain accounts are engaging, that maybe they sent an email to a company, didn't hear anything back, but the next day 4 people were on the website watching a video at the same time. That tells them there's traction there and how to follow up and when to follow up and potentially who to follow up with. So we call those ghost replies. And we, with most of our customers, will put together dashboards and other tools that allow the reps to see those as they're happening so they know where to be spending their time prospecting. And like in our previous examples, this isn't just about sales follow-up, well, that's the heart of the use case, but it's also about what marketing can do when they see those ghost replies. You can have custom outreach and content that goes out as well. Maybe you trigger for a really high-value account that just shows a bunch of anonymous responses, a more high-value direct mail campaign or something that goes into that account, tries to build that engagement, get an actual touchback, and be able to book a meeting. It could go into just monitoring more and passing more of that intelligence back to sales, and then triggering ads or something like that to nurture the account better. And then again, prioritizing that follow-up, understanding where the best opportunities are for your team to spend their time, spend the resources across both marketing and sales. Because in an ABM program, you are all about spending your resources in the right place, knowing where you can provide the most value. And this type of data and understanding these types of responses that B2B buyers are very likely to give you today, following up anonymously but not talking to you immediately, really allow you to drive a lot more focus and effectiveness in your programs. So in conclusion, we started up the webinar asking how do we build high-performance multi-channel programs, and then diving into some specifics that really come out of looking at these case studies. And there's a few takeaways that I hope everyone is able to go back and apply and share and have at least good discussions with their teams about. The first one is that high performers personalize across channels. You can't predict how your buyers are going to respond to you, but you can be assured that it's going to be across a number of different devices, a number of different channels. So you need to be in all of them, and your message needs to be consistent. Secondly, use intent to drive messaging for those ABM campaigns. One of the things in ABM programs that is often, I think, neglected or underserved is the process of accruing enough account insights to drive really effective personalization. We know that the best performing campaigns and ABM programs have higher levels of personalization. Intent gives you the ability to do that at scale without needing to do tons of manual research across hundreds of accounts that might be in your program. Allows you to build really great segmentation. And third and finally, provide sales with specific plays based on engagement. Some marketing teams might think, well, an ABM program, we're going to be focused on the right accounts, and so sales is automatically going to know what to do. They're automatically going to know how to follow up. And that's not true. They've been running very different programs for the last 10 or 15 years of what B2B marketing looked like. This is a new type of outreach. This is a new type of coordination. And the more specific you are about the timing, about the people, about the content that those sales reps should be focused on, the more effective they're going to be, the better results they're going to see, and ultimately the more investment that program is going to get, because you're going to see great results when sales understands the value that you're creating in your ABM program and is excited and really prepared for sharp and effective follow-up with your prospects. So thank you all for joining. We did have a few questions that came in during the webinar, so let's go ahead and dive into a couple of those in the few minutes we have left. The first question that I'll highlight, because I do see this one a lot, is just what are some of the biggest pitfalls we see companies making in regards to ABM? And I'll highlight a few. One of them is definitely failing to build the organizational support and alignment for the program in advance. You need buy-in from sales, you need an executive sponsor, and everyone needs to be on the same page about what to expect from this program. So definitely building the organizational alignment and not just hoping that you'll launch something and then win buy-in later because you got great results all by yourself as maybe like a demand gen team. You really need that alignment and cross functional support from the very beginning to make ABM effective. Another pitfall that I see commonly, and I alluded to it just a moment ago, is not investing enough in account insights. So in a tier 1 program where you're reaching out just to your top 10 or 15 customers, you need to have really deep insights about those accounts to drive a great program. You need to know specifically the solution and the business problem that you're selling into, what the rest of the environment is there, who the whole buying group is. You're not going to be able to just turn on kind of a single tactic and then all of a sudden, book a bunch of meetings off of that. Be ready to invest in a deep account insight development process with sales and marketing resources together, and to stay in sync about that and to be doing a lot of information sharing along the way. The same thing applies in other tiers of your program and other models, like a one-to-many, where you've got hundreds or thousands of accounts and not just dozens. But again, their intent data can help you scale. But know what your account insight strategy is, because if all you have is a list of accounts but not actually any strategy about how to do personalization for them, you're really just going to be doing modified cold calling, and that's not going to have the results that you want. The last one, I think, is just a tendency to over-rely on a single tactic, thinking that because you launched personalizations or because you launched just ads by themselves, that all of ABM is running. You really do need to see multiple channels for follow-up, and really having a very specific plan for what that looks like for sales. They need to be trained, they need to be equipped, they need to know what all of these different new kind of data points are that marketing is working off of. And so having a really thorough kind of sales engagement and training process where you can explain what plays marketing is running is really, really important. The second question I'll tackle, and again, one that came up here and that we get a lot in talking to customers and prospects, is how to go about evaluating an ABM vendor or different technology investments. It's a really good question, and I actually encourage people to not think about, getting started with ABM as just with technology first as the question, but instead to, as you're going through and building that alignment with those other parts of your organizations, you need to be selling a vision for what ABM could look like And because you're involving marketing and sales working together, it really needs to look like a specific program. You're going to have a workflow and business process where, one type of, nurturing leads to another, then you have sales engagement, and you might have other functions getting involved at different points. You might have customer success getting involved for certain conversations, different parts of field marketing. So being able to get everyone onto the same page about what the program looks like on a high level, and then go to technology vendors, not just for technology, but as potential partners. Tell them about the workflow you're trying to execute, tell them about that business process you're trying to execute, and ask them to show you how they're going to make that happen for you. A really good vendor is going to respond to you as a partner and not just show you a bunch of features, but dive into that workflow, give you feedback on it, because they've probably seen dozens like it and can steer you around some pitfalls or blind spots in your plan, but also really get into the nitty-gritty with you, helping you understand your whole tech stack and saying, here's the holes we fill, and here's other things you might need to consider. They'll help you build out your plan and ultimately, hopefully, really help you be successful. So don't just treat it as a feature bake-off or a purely technology consideration, but think about them as a key partner, because really in these early days of ABM gaining traction as a strategy, the vendors just have a ton of experience from working with other programs and should be able to give a lot of great feedback to you on the workflows that you're trying to roll out and how ultimately to be most effective with those in your organization, and even help bring some insights that you might not have thought to ask about. So that's how I would go about that process of evaluating potential vendors and partners to work with. I think that's the time we have, so thanks again for joining us today. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm Andrew@Triblio.com. Have a great day, and again, we'll be sending out the link to these tomorrow for those of you who registered.